Guys, welcome back to World of Warships. Today we're taking a look at the Jaarsveld. This here is the last Dutch light cruiser we have to look at coming into the game this update, or rather early access this update. As always, I will recommend you guys wait the 2 months to get these ships completely for free. Except maybe the Jaarsveld here. This one is available at the end of the Battle Pass, the Event Pass. And not only at the end of the Battle Pass, it is at the end of the free track, allowing us to not spend any money, just play the game, and you'll get this ship at the end of the month. Very cool, allowing you to have a decent start on your way to that incredibly powerful tier 10. All the way through this line, I don't think this is going to be a bad grind at all. The guns are relatively comfortable to use all the way through, as well as they all have very powerful airstrikes. Yes, with the Jaarsveld here, we still have these amazing airstrikes. Not quite Utrecht levels, but they're the same as the tier 9 Coehoorn. And with a longer reload though. That's really the main difference, as well as slightly worse range. 11 kilometer range here with a 55-second reload base. You can get that down below 40 though. It's a lot of damage. And at tier 8, we have even more battleships to fight that have 32 millimeters of armor. So they're almost more powerful here because we get more full pens. That said, though, against an Awami at close range, you'd think we'd be a little bit scared. Fortunately, though, we have light cruiser armor, or the lack of armor, I suppose. So this Awami is just going to overpen us. That is the weakness, I suppose, of large battleship guns, especially ones like Awami that have pretty good shell velocity. He's just going to overpen us. There is a portion of our citadel that is raised. This actually does have a stepped citadel, so we are getting a little bit lucky. But this is very common, I would say, for a light cruiser. At least at these ranges here, we're not going to get smashed too often. Maybe that's just... maybe I'm wrong about that, actually. Feel free to let me know how wrong I am. But I find that these light cruisers, we can get away with a lot that we probably shouldn't here. Already up to 50,000 damage, by the way, just in the first 2 minutes of this video. All from this Awami. We're just absolutely farming this poor guy. Open water is not where you should play these. I mean, if I'm being honest, you probably should take a lot of damage here. I am probably getting lucky, all right? I'll be reasonable, okay? I'll be reasonable. I should be taking much more damage here than I actually am. This poor Awami, man. But this is what these ships can do. If you're caught open water against one ship, you know, multiple ships fighting you is going to be a problem. You can make it work. Also, I could just go dark. That's the other portion here. We could just not fire now that we're outside of 10 kilometers. Our concealment here is very, very good. Under 10 kilometer detect here. And then I could just drop airstrike after airstrike on this guy. These ships are incredibly powerful and will be incredibly frustrating to fight against. Oh, man. I see many Awami games in my future, like this poor guy. And I don't like it. I don't like that future for myself, but what can I do about it, right? I'm not in charge of this game, unfortunately, so this is what we've got to deal with. I suppose you just gotta hope the Dutch ship misses the airstrikes, right? Maybe you can juke the Dutch ship player, and certainly that is a possibility. 13.5-second lead time here. Small box means it can be difficult to lead these things. Colombo jukes to the right, dodges my first strike, and then he cuts back in. Legendary. A little annoying when you're playing the Dutch ships, certainly, but he actually dodges all of our bombs. I got some practicing to do, I suppose, but very nice dodge there from the Colombo. These are avoidable airstrikes, at least. I am a little bit doom and gloom about these, I will admit it, perhaps overly so, but it's just I don't want this in the game, but that's okay. The tier 8 here does have some downsides. We don't actually have more range on the tier 8 light cruiser than we do on the tier 8 heavy cruiser. The Haarlem does get a kilometer more range, so it has 12 kilometer range on its bombs versus the 11 here on the Jaarsveld. So that's nice. As soon as we get to tier 9 and 10, though, that's where the light cruisers have more range and better reload, with retaining that above 32 millimeters of pen. Very, very powerful. These airstrikes will get shot down, though. That's the weakness. I haven't found that too much, only when I've tried to airstrike ships that are clumped up, maybe 3 or 4 ships, all stacked on top of each other. That's when the drop really doesn't get through. Or maybe a defensive fire from an especially powerful tier 10 light cruiser. That's when it won't get through either. But otherwise, I haven't really found myself having too many issues with it. Notice the 360 turrets here, allowing us to deal with the Jaeger. Very lucky that we actually got in range to spot that Jaeger. That would have been very difficult to clutch this game up if he had stayed out of detection range. I don't think we would have been able to deal with him. But fortunately we do, and the 360 turrets allow us to instantly swap over and deal with this Takahashi. We don't get those 360 turrets at all in the tier 9 and only a couple of the tier 10. So a very nice feature of the tier 8 here. Relatively maneuverable, but still feeling quite sluggish thanks to the build we're running. I still haven't played with the more maneuverable build, the less airstrike focused build. So I'll have to do that a little bit later, although we got a lot to cover with this new update. But for now, with the full airstrike builds, even in a tier 10 game, man, managing to clutch up. Not huge damage there, but exerting pressure on targets of value, I suppose, dealing damage to some destroyers, some submarines, but most of all, farming, that poor Iwami. You are very good at farming battleships, man. Even though we don't have very good HE DPM, we still got a lot of damage out of it. It lights a lot of fires, but also we have that 32 mil pen still. Fortunately, with the Jaarsveld here over the tier 8 premium Vrijheid, we have those German-style 128s. They're not quite as good as the tier 9 and 10, looking into the stats here a little bit more. Certainly longer reload, but also the shell velocity isn't quite up to par with the tier 9 and 10. It's still very, very good. To 15 kilometers, you still have 9.9 second flight time. Much, much better than any of the other light cruisers at your tier. It's very, very good. Even if it's not the 9.1 seconds of the tier 9 and 10 to 15 kilometers with that HE. So still very easy to lead these guns. Not quite as easy, but it's not too bad to land a lot of shells. And those 360 turrets mean you have relatively good firing angles, as well as just convenience to just always have your main guns on target. That poor Tangshi, man. Tier 8 really starts to fight some battleships with very little armor to deal with you. We get a lot of shatters at higher tier, certainly at tier 10. A lot of the battleships start to have 38 millimeters of deck armor, or 50 or 60, allowing them to shatter a lot of the bombs here. Still take a lot of damage, but shatter most of the strike, unless it hits superstructure, bow, or stern. Here at this mid-tier, these suddenly are incredibly powerful alpha damage heavy bombs. And they have that really fast reload. 55 seconds still. I mean, the Haarlem is the other tier 8 Dutch cruiser, the heavy cruiser in the tech tree. Now it has a 100-second reload base. It's a lot to deal with, man, these ships. As far as playstyle goes, if you're struggling with these ships, as I do think a lot of people will, if you're not used to light cruisers, maybe just go play an island and use your airstrikes to start off with. I always say this, cruisers, especially light cruisers, become much more dangerous as the game goes on. You're allowed to play more risky and exert more pressure on the battlefield as the match progresses, just because there's less battleships to deal with. There's less crossfires to deal with. There's less overmatch. There's less other angles for you to worry about and possibly die very quickly to. So these ships can get away with playing incredibly safe and still doing some damage as they play around islands. And caps, especially when there's an island in the middle of a cap, if you can get to that island and sit there, you can just drop strike after strike on people trying to get close, assuming you have spotting, right? There's always that team play element that you are lacking. No radars here, no hydros here. We do very much have to worry about torpedo salvos, as well as just not be able to spot targets in range for our airstrikes. But there's a lot of islands around these maps, and especially as the games get later, notice we're now using an island on the enemy's side of the map, right? This was their spawn side, and we're using this island now to farm this Richelieu down. You can get really creative with it, especially because the concealment is so good. You don't have to shoot your guns all the time open water. Oftentimes, it'll be better for you to stay concealed and get yourself into a really powerful island position that allows you to farm people over it without getting spotted yourself. We're going to continue to push here as this game is almost over, but this point still stands, I think, that this ship, with its concealment, reasonable speed, can get into some very powerful positions. It is a lot of patience, certainly required, and it will take a lot of game knowledge as well. That's where newer players, less experienced light cruiser players are going to struggle with it. as well as the lead time on these drops. I've gotten a little better at it while playing just exclusive these Dutch light cruisers over the last few days, but they will take you a bit to learn the drops. But when you do, oh man, the damage. Actually, I gotta apologize. Going after the Richelieu there, I saw the 32 mil battleship, got excited. I should have gone after the carrier, man. I think we would have done some nasty damage into that carrier. I do have a contract, right, with myself. I always have to go after the carrier. So I failed you guys in this one. But still great damage in on that Richelieu there. Now to deal with an anchorage, very scary. To deal with cruiser, especially heavy AP, heavy American AP that has the improved pen angles. So this could be a little bit rough for us. Fortunately, we do have relatively good firing angles, and we'll just angle in anytime he shoots the AP at us. Not worth risking too much here, although if he's got the HE, we don't really have to worry quite as much. If we're playing against cruisers, or anyone really, we want to be angled in such a way where we're pushing behind their ship, is the idea here. It forces him to go more broadside to shoot us, and that's why I changed direction here. And the 360 turrets certainly help us out quite a lot there. Fortunately, anchorage gets mostly overpens in on us there, so we don't actually take as much damage. No armor is sometimes the best kind of armor. A little sad how that works out sometimes, but that is a benefit of these light cruisers. And you really do have to abuse some of those game mechanics. Certainly with battleships, the overmatch, you gotta abuse that to get the most out of those ships. With light cruisers, sometimes you just gotta abuse the fact that people will overpen you because you have such little armor. And at closer ranges, if you're gonna survive, you do have to make that work at times. It is still risky, don't get me wrong, but with an 11-kilometer airstrike into tier 10 games, sometimes you gotta make suicidal pushes like this, where, I mean, sure, we're going to be looking to win this game. It's already turning into a blowout, certainly. But look at this push we're making. Very, very aggressive. Perhaps too bold. But 12,000 damage in on the Chikuma 2. We want to keep in range of these airstrikes. To get the most out of these Dutch cruisers, you really do need to be getting value out of these airstrikes. You can't just use guns, even though the guns are very good as well. If you want the best out of these ships, you do need to be playing in such a way to get value out of the airstrikes. Perhaps I'm doing too much on airstrikes, though, with these ships. Maybe I do need to shoot my guns a little bit more. I think it's fair to say that I am overvaluing positions where I can strike people without using my main guns, perhaps. Another 10,000 damage. It hits cruisers so hard, too, man. And we managed to take them out there. Although, we don't have a Hydro. And that's going to be a bit of an issue coming up. Notice that we don't know where that Yu Yang is. We could be getting YOLO'd at any time. Howden Liu there, very scary airstrikes himself. So we do want to stay concealed here. And we're not quite in range to actually strike that Howden right now. Worcester, that's a very powerful tier 10 light cruiser AA. Let's see if we can get a drop through. Only one. We're not stacking strikes on them, but we'll just go with one for now. Looks like the planes might get there. I am concerned about that Yu Yang, as you can tell. Farming over for Howden. And indeed we do. 8,500. I would expect Worcester AA to deal with that. And oh no, guess who forgot about Chikuma 2 torp angles? This guy. We live though, just barely. That's an AR buff. Actually, that's just tactical AR. That's what we call it in the business, all right? I don't want to hear anything else about it. I'm getting very lucky to survive some of these games. Certainly Vrijheid there, where we nearly died to the Ohio at long range overmatch into our Citadel. The Jaarsveld here will have to worry about that as well. It has a 30 mil Citadel deck armor, so very, very scary to face that 30 mil overmatch even. A lot of that these days that for cruisers to deal with. Another 5k in on the Howden, man. There's no risk here, man. It's just, I mean, sure, I nearly died, but once you're in the island position, how am I risking my ship against this Howden, man? Look at the Shivato here, risking his ship to go for the torp run. In fact, he'd risk his ship and he's gonna die going for that torpedo run. Not us, though. We could sit behind the island dropping strikes on people. I'm a little surprised they released this line the way they did. I will say, though, with Jaarsveld, I like that the range isn't as extreme. I found myself very limited in the positions I could play and still use the airstrikes, or just there were games where I couldn't use the airstrikes, where I didn't really feel that with the Coehoorn or the Utrecht. Both of them have so much further range. It's like 2.5 kilometers more to get to the tier 9 as far as the range goes on these airstrikes. So maybe that's because tier 9 10 face super ships, much more passive games. I guess that would make sense. So when it comes to the build on the Jaarsveld here, I went with a bit of a AA build. I'm not going to lie, this helped a lot as far as getting into positions where we're on island cover. We're going to take a lot of airstrikes, certainly if they're on the enemy team. If there's carriers, we're going to be spotted as well. We want to deal with those planes because those forward-facing positions are where this ship needs to be to actually use its airstrike. Certainly 11 kilometers is enough at tier 8. In fact, it's very good. But relative to the tier 9 and 10, it's a little short, although not nearly as short as the Vrijheid over there. So 128, very nice to have over the new premium as well, but the reload is quite a bit longer. Also not quite the shell velocity on these ones compared to the 9 and 10, but still a very powerful ship in my opinion with this build, although this is 21 pointer, so you probably won't have that for the tier 8. So I would probably give up this AA stuff at least to start with, maybe even superintendent, since you do want that upfront HP. You don't have a lot of HP to start with this light cruiser. And we always want focus fire training for that extra reload reduction on our airstrikes here. So 37.4 second reload. This is tier 8, man. This is 32 mil pen. Yeah, that's in the game now. So as for the upgrades here, again, we're lacking maneuverability, but for those airstrikes, man, it's so good. I will have to try out a less airstrike focused build, more main gun focused build. I think the strikes will still be quite strong, but it'll allow me to get more consistent damage, maybe out of the main guns. Very interested to try that going forward. Although now that we're in 14.0, first patch of the new year, we got a lot of buffs and nerfs to take a look at. So that's going to be coming up next before we play these things again. But first impressions of this line are they're very strong. No armor, sometimes the best armor, but this one has an issue that the other ones don't have to worry about. A stepped up citadel in the middle. We know this means this is a bit of a shot trap here for incoming AP salvos to get citadels on this ship. Bit of a weird looking angled turtleback thingy. I don't think it's angled enough to really deal with AP, but we'll see, I suppose. You know, shells tend to plunge. Even at reasonably close ranges, like 10 kilometers, I don't think it's angled quite enough. But 30 mil Citadel deck armor means what happened to us in Vrijheid there in that last clip in that video can also happen to us here at the Jaarsveld. So got to be a little bit careful of that. But notice this armor here doesn't actually cover that stepped up portion. It's a little hard to see. But if I swap back and forth really quickly, you'll see it there. So if you can overmatch 16 when it's angled like this, you'll have that very, very easy shot trap to Citadel this ship with, where the tier 9 and 10 don't have to worry about that because this armor does protect the Citadel. So there is no step up there. That's where we can get away with angling a little bit easier on the 9 and 10. So the tier 8 does have quite a few more weaknesses, but you still retain that powerful airstrike at tier 8. 32 mil, I mean, it's 34. 32 is the main threshold. That's why I keep saying 32, if you're wondering. That's the key threshold you're getting over here with 34 millimeters. Still got that 5800 alpha. You still get 6 planes in your strike, right? Coehoorn gets 6, but the Utrecht gets 7. You don't go down to 5. It's still Coehoorn strikes, but with slightly worse reload and 2.5 kilometers less range. But that damage, man, that damage is still there. And here's the special camo. I guess that's been released now that we're in 14.0. But this one is at the end of the dockyard, or sorry, the event pass, the battle pass. I get the names mixed up because we have so many different names for the exact same thing to try and get you to spend more money on the game. This is fortunately, though, in the free track. So you don't have to spend money to get early access to this Dutch Tier 8 light cruiser. Although you do have to get to the end. So that means you're waiting probably till the end of this month. But let me know what you think in the comments down below about these Dutch ships. Am I overreacting? Am I overhyping these ships? Let me know. I could be. I'll admit that I could be, but I'm very worried about fighting against these ships. I am not looking forward to it. I'll be honest with you. Thank you very much for watching and have a great rest of your day.